Despite how much I rave about mind maps on this channel, they're only one tool in a larger toolbox for understanding our world. The toolbox itself is actually system thinking. Hi, I'm Shane, and I help companies and individuals think through their toughest problems. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to combine system thinking and mind maps to break down the complexities of work and life. So what is system thinking? It is a holistic approach to analysis that looks at things as a whole and how its individual parts work with each other rather than simply the sum of its parts. Just about everything is a system. Our planet is part of a solar system spinning around the sun. The sun sustains an ecosystem of habitats and organisms, including our civilizations, which are systems of competing and cooperating governments. You and I are biological systems of cells, cognitive systems of our experiences, and cultural identities. At first glance, a system might appear to be incomprehensibly complex, but they can all be broken down into simpler parts for us to understand, troubleshoot, and to improve. My system thinking framework has 3 layers, and this is the same mental process I apply to every mind map that I make. They are the system, the component, and the data layers. Using a car analogy, the system is the car itself, the components are the engine, the battery, the axles, and the wheels. And then the data is, for example, the electrical readings of that battery, right? So at the highest level is the system itself, which is defined by the topic that I'm trying to understand. And I like to set my boundaries around a question that encapsulates my objective, so I'm not boiling the ocean. If you've ever gone down a Wikipedia research rabbit hole, then you know exactly what I mean, right? So we want to be sufficient to purpose, and questions tend to capture our purpose. Going back to a car analogy, am I trying to understand the car from the perspective of a mechanic that's troubleshooting a problem, or am I designing a brand new car as a Tesla engineer or designer? What perspective I'm approaching this question really dictates how I'm trying to understand the system. So when I first make a mind map, I'm basically drawing my initial understanding of reality. In other words, I'm forming a hypothesis, a visual hypothesis. Next is the component level, which, at this point, we're breaking the car down into its individual parts of transmission, battery, radiator, axles, and brakes. And each of these components serve their own purpose. And these are the major nodes of that system, right? And if I were a mechanic, my objective at this point is to identify which components are relevant to the question that I'm trying to answer. And as I expand my map, I'm asking myself what contributes to and how they contribute to the greater whole or the system. And then finally, at the data level, I'm busting out my gauges, my scanners, all the measuring tools, right? To check the components that I've listed that I think are relevant. So if I'm troubleshooting, a power problem, the engine won't start for whatever reason. Maybe it's the engine, right? So there's the engine component, and then there's also the battery component. And then at the data level, then I'm busting out the gauges to figure out, hey, what are the electrical readings from the battery, right? I'm literally expanding out the different nodes. One thing to note is that at the data level, I'm simply collecting data that I think is relevant to answering my question. I'm not passing judgment yet, right? That will come later in the component and systems levels where mental models really help with framing how we should be judging the data. So we'll get to that in a bit, but right now we're just data collecting. If you've actually seen some of my other videos, especially around intentional productivity, you'll realize that this is the same way that I formulate my funnel of goals system, right? It follows the same kind of hierarchy of sorts. Go from the high level down to the granular. Before I go into the examples, I want to talk about mental models and judgment for 1 second. We're all naturally prone to cognitive biases that cloud our judgment. So to think more objectively, I try to withhold judgment at the data level and instead, try to collect enough data so I get a chance to actually apply mental models at the component and system level, right? So I'm not just forming my judgment as I'm reading articles or going through data tables and research. I want to look at things more holistically. What are mental models? Well, they are simplified representations of how reality works. So for example, in economics, you have the supply and demand model, which is a really powerful way to quickly understand how market dynamics work. It's too simple to capture the full complexities of our economies, of course, but it's such a mental shortcut to understanding, otherwise it's something very difficult and abstract. The most well-known user of mental models is Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner, who famously said, "You can't really know anything just by remembering isolated facts and try to bang them back. You've got to have models in your head. You've got to array your experience both vicarious and direct on this latticework of models." You may have noticed students who just try to remember and pound back what is remembered. Well, they fail in school and in life. You've got to hang experience on a latticework of models in your head. Well, that's exactly what mind maps are. They're a latticework, they're a literal latticework of mental models and data points and experiences. Here's an example, speaking of that, of how I would understand a new company, right? Be an investor like Charlie Munger, or as a business developer trying to sell to this company as a client, right? In this case, I'm going to use Snapchat. As I mentioned earlier, before I even start drawing the mind map, I'm trying to ask myself, what is the question? Am I approaching it as the investor, or am I approaching it as the BD guy, right? So my question here then is going to be, how do I sell to Snapchat, not how would I invest in Snapchat? And I think the parts of the system that are relevant to me understanding Snapchat are going to be the key people, the strengths of this company, the competition, who they face, and the product features or the products themselves that the company makes. And then at the component level, we've got let's say under product is face filters, which Snapchat is famous for. And more recently, we've got the world lenses, which basically turn an entire building or landmark into an augmented reality asset or experience. And then we can go down, right? In order to understand face filters more, maybe we have to understand how the business model, how they monetize off of it. What is the total revenue contribution? Within the business model, essentially, I need to understand revenue and costs, right, which contribute to profit. And under revenue sources is native ads that just pop up when you're going through the app. Then how much are they making and what kind of growth is it experiencing? Under cost, we've got the major ones, which is servers. It takes a lot to store all those pictures and videos and effects. R&D, as well as the creation, because they do get studios and lens creators on board in order to do that, right? There's actually a marketing cost to that, perhaps. Anyways, the other components are world lens. If you need to understand what that is, it's going to be total locations. Then because we don't have quantitative, because it's so new, maybe they don't have quantitative measurements that I can actually research. Then it's about the user reviews, as well as talking to the people who create the teams that create these lenses and how they are experiencing. Which then goes to what type of tools we should be using in breaking down and analyzing these components at each level of the system. So going back to here, the framework, right? At the system itself, mind maps are really useful to expanding out all the complexity of the system without losing picture of the larger whole or their dynamics. And at a component level, mental models are really helpful to operate. And I'll get into that in a bit. And then finally, we've got data and observations, right? So at this point, what we have is, well, at the component level, the mental models that I would use to analyze, let's say, business model or total revenue contribution might be, is it a subscription, right? Is it ad, subscription, or transaction-based like Amazon? And all of these actually have different pros and cons with each business model. So by understanding, let's say it's ads, right? Then you need a lot of volume. How's their user growth? That's going to be influencing an ads business. Also, you have scale. Scale is interesting because there's density components to it, right? So for example, in order for a social network to work, you need to have a density of, let's say, users, right? In order to have messaging back and forth for the value to be created. Or with Lens, or with World Lens, which is location-based AR, it's based on the number of locations. Do you have to travel all the way to New York to see the Empire State Building turn into something? Or can you just put your Snapchat camera at any object or any building and it'll turn? That's gonna determine the frequency in which people actually use the feature. Or another mental model that is common in the technology industry is feedback loops, right? How do these systems learn? So one part is actually network effects. So talking about user growth, right? Having that density of users and friends talking with each other. Well, that is in itself a network effect, because as the network grows, the app itself becomes more valuable, right? Understanding that will really help you understand the business and how the company operates, what their incentives are. And then there's also machine learning. With Snapchat, as well as with any AR company, when they are scanning your face, they're learning about, basically the features and everything. It actually updates your algorithms. The same thing actually with the location type of AR too, which is with every scan of Snapchat, they're able to recreate, let's say, Big Ben, right? The clock tower in London, and stitching together various different angle shots that people have taken of this landmark, and then reconstruct it in 3D to update the system with their accuracy around, the shape that can be augmented. So there's also machine learning aspect to it too, where the more users you have, the more usage of the app, it will actually improve the system over time for everybody, right? Not just from a network standpoint. Timeframes. Timeframes is important because it's they're the first to market, right? There's the first mover's advantage of sorts. That means you have a novel thing that, let's say, everybody wants to use. Face filters, when it first started, Snapchat, that's their claim to fame, right? And now Facebook, Instagram, a lot of other companies have that. So there is a time frame to a whole strategic angle again. But these are the mental models or the perspectives that I'm analyzing things from a component level standpoint. So how do all of these things impact their business model and their incentives is what I'm trying to understand. And then going down to the data points, right? Right here, again, the tool that we're using is really just observation. But observation has a lot of things where it comes, the questions that are where should I get this data? What data source is reliable, right? Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? So quantitative wise, you can probably get it from industry reports if it's a public company or it's a market that's relatively well covered. And then you've got news, press releases, and all this stuff like that. And then you can also talk to people. Insiders are people who work within Snapchat or the client. You've got studios who work direct, they're partners, right? Who are creating these experiences for Snapchat and for their users. And then finally, you can talk to users themselves. If you have a younger generation and cohort that you can tap into, or friends even, right? Just ask them about their experiences with using the app. And then finally, using the product yourself will help you learn a lot about this company and what they do. These are the kind of tools and observations that I will be making in order to understand Snapchat at this product feature level. And then zooming back out, let's say I collected all of this data, right? Let's go back into the system level. And perhaps, for example, I figured out a few key people, let's say their VP of strategy or director of partnerships I need to reach out to, or even their product manager or tech leads, right? So from here, in order to understand more about, face filters or sell to them based on that product feature, I need to understand the key decision makers. Who do I need to influence, right? Who do I need to talk to? And then for World Lenses, maybe because it's such a new novel feature, maybe it's talking to the R&D lead, right, of their team, talking to the engineers. And then we talked about timeframes and competition, right? First to market, first movers advantage, that influences competition a lot. And then we've also got network effects. So Snapchat is different than Facebook in that a lot of their users is actually close friends rather than just like a one-to-many follower system, right? In that sense, the Snapchat network is known as a tight network or intimate network, where people are very familiar with each other and there's like a communication because their messaging app first, rather than Instagram or Twitter where you just have thousands of people following like one person, right? One to many versus many to many. So they have a tight network, and that is actually one of their differentiating strengths that Facebook has a harder time, for example, reaching, right? In this respect, these arrows represent the dynamic of the system components working with each other, influencing each other. And this is what's really useful once you've actually laid out the components in the data. You can actually start drawing the relationships as you start noticing them, right? This, again, is also a judgment layer that you apply at the system level, which is connecting the dots. But at this point, what are you supposed to do with a mind map like this, right? Because a mind map by itself isn't very useful, especially when you're working with a team. It's really good in understanding system, but what are your outputs, right? What are the questions you're trying to answer at the end of the day? Did this mind map actually help you, answer the question, how do I sell to Snapchat? Well, the output, right, is going to be really important. So at this point, after you've actually made your mind map and gone through the whole process of collecting the data, applying mental models to understand components, is that you should know the industry context, right? Specifically, what is the opportunity size, right? How much money do the client make or the customer make? How much, can you make off of that as well, right? And also understanding their fears from a competition standpoint. Maybe Facebook's, knocking on their door, hot on their heels. This is going to be really important information to know as you're going to negotiations and pitches. And then we've got identifying key people, right? Influencers and decision makers, understanding their goals, their pains and desires. Again, this is speaking their language, which is critical in selling to them. And then number 4 is knowing your own value add, right? Can you improve face filters? Can you improve world lens, right? Where does your value add to them? Why should they pay you? And then finally, at this point, after going through, talking to their people, going through their annual reports, you should actually also understand their language. How do they convey, what they want, right? Can you use vocabulary from their 5-year goal or something, right? In order to make that pitch, to align your interests with theirs. These are the outputs that you will gain after going through the system analysis. The same thing also applies, let's say, as an investor, right? You just now totally understand where Snapchat sits in the market. Or let's say you're an insider, you actually just joined Snapchat on their strategy team, right? Or as a product manager. You now know the entire system, who you need to influence in order to get things done, who you need to get approval on, and how does your work contribute to the larger whole. These are the things that, at the end of the day, we need to think holistically about the things that we're joining, also for our own purpose, so that we know we're not just a cog in a larger machine. We actually know how the machine operates. The next example is going to be a bit personal, and it's about understanding a person, right? And it might sound kind of funny, but I actually create mind maps for people that I've met who are really interesting. I want to get to know them better. I want to craft a friendship around getting to know them, right? So what I do is I actually intently listen. I'm not drawing a mind map immediately when I'm talking to somebody or getting to know somebody, right? But I'll actually, during my journal sessions the next morning, I will mind map out everything I remember about the person. And the configuration that, I think I look for is what is their past, present, and future, right? These are, as well as their personal philosophies, these are the component layers of a person. That's what makes a person who they are, right? If the person is himself or herself is the system, and then at the data layer, it's the stories, right? These are the experiences or the books, the movies, all these things that influence the past, present, and future personal identity. If I were to draw this out in this mind map fashion, it would actually look like this, right? You've got the past, you have the future, and then you have the present, which is in the middle, and then you have the worldviews, which then can be broken down, let's say, into philosophy, or I have another framework, which is, what's your verb? These are the things of the subcomponents that make up the main component, which then I can apply different mental models on, right? If I know that this person is a Stoic, reads Stoic philosophy, Seneca or Marcus Aurelius, then I immediately know, how they kind of see the world and themselves. Same thing with what's their verb, right? I like to describe my close friends using one verb, actually. That's a mental model in itself. And then you have past, right? So if we were to actually go down the rabbit hole of, let's say, again, so the green is a system, which is the person, right? You have the orange circled here, which is component. And then finally, you have the stories, the data layer, right? All of this is to answer the question of the input, which is who is Sheng, right? So in my past, for example, understanding Sheng, we have heritage, education, career, and places I've lived, right? These are the things that really influence my past or part of my past. And as I go down this heritage, I'm a Chinese American, born in Shanghai. I moved to California at 7 years old, right? Now we're collecting kind of like facts and data and stories. In terms of personality, I was a class bully, and I spent most of my lunch times in detention up until 4th grade, right? These are the stories. So obviously, this kind of tells you a bit about my personality as well as my change over time. Family is only child, right? So at this point, if you're mapping all this out, you have a very solid understanding of my past, who I am, how they contributed even perhaps to my present, right? How they influence my present projects, interests, and friends. So for example, because I grew up as an only child, I, am now, one of my interests is actually building community. And also discovering what community actually means, right? My heritage as a Chinese American influences actually my philosophy and my worldviews, my values, right? And then finally, my future. What are my future plans? Well, to create MyMap Nation as an online community for MyMap practitioners and people who think connectedly. Also my hopes, which is to make a bigger impact that's positive in the world, right? And helping people. It's like, how do we link our past, our present into the future, as well as how do we understand this person from their worldviews? And I promise you, after you make a mind map like this about, someone you just met, you're gonna remember surprisingly large amounts about this person and have a really solid understanding of why they think the way they do and how they actually react to things as well, right? It's such a powerful tool to building genuine relationships and understanding people, because it actually forces you to listen deeply and intently and be engaged as well. So only good things can happen, but it does take a bit of effort. That's why I kind of save it for people that I, really like to get to know. The surprising thing though is that when you mind map, often enough, you start thinking in terms of mind maps, you start thinking in connected ways, where these days I can actually remember so much more because I'm already drawing these connections as I'm talking to someone in real time. I don't always need to draw this out anymore, right? And that's one of the huge advantages of mind mapping, is that it actually is like going to the gym and doing repetitions, mental repetitions, right? It actually increases your mind's ability to think more connectedly and in a systematic way, system thinking, right? All right, guys, that is all for now. I hope that was helpful, right? In, understanding really complex things like people, as well as businesses, governments, countries, ecosystems. Just remember, everything can be broken down to their simplest parts. And I take a lot of comfort in that we have the 3 tools of mind maps, mental models, and powers of observation to help us understand these complexities, and hopefully it gives us more agency and less stress. All right, guys, if you have liked this video, please hit the like or subscribe. It really helps out this channel. And yeah, I will see you guys next time.